The mission of the Wisconsin Center for Education Research is to conduct and support research, critical policy analysis, and public dialogue on student experience in order to inform policies, programs, and practices that promote academic and career success for all learners. Good. Okay, so hopefully that'll make clear to you, that's not our actual mission, but it couldn't be said any better than that. It'll make clear to you why CCWT fits so well within WCER. Many people see WCER as primarily involved with K-12 research, which is most assuredly has never been the case, but is much less the case than it was even before. And so this emphasis on the success of all learners at all stages in their careers is very, very, very much what we're about. I also personally work on STEM education in higher ed. And I will say as an aside that I am totally unable to advise the students who come to me who are interested in doing anything other than academia. And so, because my own life, my own career has been entirely in academia. So one of my hopes from CCWT is not only that you inform state agencies, that you inform the state, but also that faculty themselves and all advisors on campus are able to come out of this with a great deal more strength and ability to advise college to workforce transition. The emphasis on the transition from college to the workforce also ties into WCR's commitment to be of service to the state and to the nation, the Wisconsin idea. And when Matt gave his proposal to me and I decided to fund it, that was a big part of why. It's a very important research endeavor. It's also an extremely important endeavor for the state. The development of the state's workforce has been a subject of substantial recent discussion, with the allied discussion of the relative roles of the state's technical colleges, two-year colleges, four-year colleges and universities, UW system universities, and UW-Madison. And if you read the newspapers and if you hear the discussions, by and large, they talk about distributions of degree programs. They talk about times to degree. They talk about producing numbers, all of which are really important, but perhaps often lost amidst the talk about programs and majors and degrees are the students themselves. And in truth, very, very few students these days, this is just not an issue for CCWT, follow the traditional pathways through college. That is just a well-known fact now that very, very few students follow the path that I followed, which was very, very linear. You know, high school, college, grad school, postdoc, professorship. That doesn't happen anymore. I mean, yes, it does occasionally. But by and large, students are constantly moving in and out of that path, which personally I think is very, very healthy. So that should they ultimately become faculty, they won't be in my position of not being able to advise their students on the reality of their lives. It's this focus on the students that their lived experiences are not simple pathways as they move in and out of both. That's what makes CCWT so important. One of the primary goals of the center is to give a voice to college students, particularly those from marginalized populations, who are usually subjects rather than active participants in these debates about college-to-work pathways. Ultimately, each pathway is taken by real people, and each with their own aspirations and their own challenges. And this center focuses on them. And its work with students will help guide teaching, training, and advising and enhance the success of today's workforce in Wisconsin. And so it is very much my pleasure to welcome all of you here. I was, in all honesty, sitting in the back saying, I don't know a lot of these people. And that's fantastic. That's another role of the center, is to bring new voices, new perspectives, new people into WCR. And I hope none of you will be a stranger to that brown tower down on Mills. You know, the phrase ivory tower, well, it's brown, but there's a little too much of the ivoryness and not enough of people coming. And so I hope the center will draw all of you to come to know who we are. And more broadly, I anticipate great success for Matt, his colleagues, and with all of you associated with our new Center for Research on College to Workforce Transitions.
Welcome again, everybody. I wanted to speak for a few minutes about this center, what it's about, why we're doing it, some of the early activities that we've initiated, and then, because this is our first seminar in our hopefully regular series of seminars, I'm going to hand it over to Jim Morgan and Linda Nielsen to talk about work ethic and self-regulated learning. And the reason I'm really excited about this seminar in particular is talk about bringing together voices and experiences that don't often get together. So somehow I doubt Jim and Linda would have been in the same panel in many other venues. And so this is a great opportunity to bring together somebody with a really strong employer voice and somebody who's studied and thought about self-regulated learning from a faculty development perspective for much of her career. So my name is Matthew Hora. I'm the director of CCWT, and I just wanted to break down the mission a little bit beyond this pretty wordy statement into what exactly is this center aiming to do. So the what part is to conduct and support research, policy analysis, and dialogue. So we have a small staff that will be conducting a lot of research and policy analysis ourselves, but we're also hoping to build a network of scholars and practitioners regionally and even around the country who can also be engaged in research and policy analysis through and with the center. So we'll be doing some of our own, and then hopefully we'll have a larger network of scholars focused on these issues. And the issues are about student experiences. As Bob said, the focus of the center is to really delve into how are students experiencing the transition from college to work. And I'll speak in a minute about how we're conceptualizing this transition. The why. We're definitely hoping to produce some scholarly articles that just a handful of people read, but our main goal is to really produce products, policy analyses, research reports, and briefs that people in the field can use of career services, state legislators, faculty, and other instructors. So our goal here is applied research, not research for research's own sake, although we're going to do some of that too. And then who? This is about all learners. Often when we think about college, we think too much of the 18 to 22-year-old traditional college student. We're talking about all learners that are coming through higher education, which today is an increasingly ethnically diverse and age-diverse population. So this could be dislocated adult workers who are seeking retraining. It could be refugee populations who are coming to Wisconsin and seeking to enter the labor market for the first time. And it could be students that are here at a campus like UW-Madison. So we're casting a wide net when we talk about learners that are going through college. So why a new center and why now? One of the main reasons we're creating this new center is this dominant idea of college to work is a simple matter of acquiring the right credential. That this is often thought of as a completion agenda, and we by no means belittle the importance of supporting students to acquire a credential, to supporting them as they gain access and then support whether they're in a certificate, an associate's, or a bachelor's degree program. But this is often thought about in two reductionist of terms, as a simple supply and demand model where there's tons of jobs out there, millions in fact, and all we need to do is work on the supply side. The supply side definitely needs to be thought about, and Jim's going to speak about some of the demographic issues that are at stake. But one of the solutions to this way of framing the issue of college and the labor market is to build pathways or ladders from college to a specific job. Now again, this is an important way to think about it, but it's just one way to think about it. And based on the research we've been doing the last few years, mostly in Wisconsin, we've concluded this is an overly structural way to think about things, that we just need to create a new program in welding or computer science, and that's going to solve all of our problems. And it also is focusing a little bit too much, based on our perspective, on the human capital theory of how investments in education will pay off in terms of increased wages and productivity. Again, this is an important and useful way to think about these issues, but it's not the only way. What we've concluded in our research is this way of thinking about it's missing some really important pieces of the puzzle. And so if we think about college to workforce as this linear transition, what we have to think about are these following pieces of the puzzle. The first is skills acquisition. How are students actually acquiring not just the technical knowledge that you get in certain courses, but habits of mind, ways of thinking, ways of interacting with other people, what some people call soft skills, unfortunately. Others call non-cognitive skills. We need to really delve more deeply into curriculum and instruction and how students are acquiring these competencies. We also need to think about career advising and guidance. What's the quality and nature of advising that students are getting from day one all the way through graduation? Hopefully these are leading to what some people call 21st century competencies, a wide array of skill sets. But then, one of the key aspects of getting a job, of course, is the job search and the hiring process. And when people talk about college to work, this is often one of the components that's rarely discussed. This can be a highly challenging and problematic part of a student's transition into the labor market. Ideally, that's going to continue over the life course. We're talking about creating lifelong learners a lot in higher education, and so this cycle shouldn't just stop. It needs to continue. And then underlying all this is this question that is part of the center we're really putting on the forefront because unfortunately it hasn't been asked enough in recent debates and dialogues about higher education. What's the purpose of this? What's the role of college in society? Is it primarily to train people for jobs, or is there something else that we need to be thinking about? And so for this center, we're really adopting a systemic perspective to think about how can we reform institutions and improve programs to serve students. And instead of a human capital approach, really thinking about cultural capital. That means just the ways of thinking and being and interacting with people that students get through their coursework and also through their advising as they go through an educational program. So we have 4 strands in the center. This is going to guide our research and policy analysis for the next several years, hopefully. The first is on skills acquisition, the second's on career guidance, third's on the job search process, and the fourth is on this big question of the role of higher education. So the center is organized around these 4 key ideas. The second reason we started the center, Bob alluded to this, and it has to do with multivocality. Whose voice is being articulated and included in debates about college to work? And unfortunately, the student's voice is too often lost in the debate, if it exists at all. And so we're really hoping to put at the forefront how students are experiencing this transition. So, thought we'd briefly go over some of the current activities of the center so you all know what we're talking about. And there's some excellent staff that I've been able to hire and have be part of the center, and they're going to talk a little bit about some of the projects that we've already started and we hope to start in the coming years. And the first is about work-based learning and skills acquisition.
I'm an anthropologist by training. I've been around for a while and I've done quite a few projects, but most recently I did a study, an ethnographic study of the experience of low-income first-generation college students in the state. So this is kind of the background that I bring to the project, to the center. On the work-based learning, we're doing, right now we just started work on a literature review of research, research literature and practitioner literature on how to design effective internships. I just had a great conversation with someone I just met at my table about how impactful her internship experiences were when she was a student. And I imagine a lot of you have had similar experiences. So we know that internships matter to people. What we want to do is be effective at instituting that sort of effectiveness in programs at a larger scale, so we affect more students in that way. So that's research literature that we're delving into, and we want to create a policy document that can be communicated, and hopefully this can expand into a larger research program where we are able to document students' experiences in these programs and correlate them with outcomes such as income over the lifespan and employment and so on. And then the only other thing that's kind of exciting that's in the offing right now is there's a real lack of knowledge about this college to workforce transition experience for a particular population in Wisconsin, which are refugee, resettlement, immigrant populations in the state. There are several groups that are in large numbers in the state and are growing. Employment, education, and then employment are two of the factors that are going to be associated with like successful integration into society. And we just really don't know very much about that. So that's another kind of project that we're thinking of.
Our goal is to better understand how educators, students, and employers basically view important skills that are learned. Ultimately, the study's two main goals are first to advance knowledge on key skills and values in the workforce and higher education, and two, to hopefully inform public policy on workforce and education that we think is often, too often focused on the meaning and nuances of people's lives.
I'm a hybrid between economists and sociologists with a focus on labor markets. I got my PhD in sociology here at DW-Madison. I worked for 5 years as a senior economist at the Department of Workforce Development here in Wisconsin. I would say my research since 2003 has been about the kind of jobs that are available, particularly in the U.S., but it's applicable to advanced capitalist societies. The dynamics of job creation, of good jobs, bad jobs, job quality, what kind of jobs are out there, and what's the projected future, what we can envision of the jobs that are coming in the near future. So my focus is on quantitative research and conceptual and theoretical research. I have some experience in ethnographic research. I look forward to also to collaborate with people doing qualitative stuff. And my first project will be about middle skills jobs. So I started collecting material this morning about this. I hope to have an idea. I have ideas about this and opinions due to my previous research, but I would like to, and I'm sure that it will change in the course of the research. And I think you will be hearing from us about this in the not so distant future. And the idea is, well, we have this notion of job polarization. Middle skilled jobs are going away. I mean, you have manufacturing jobs, clerical jobs, all these routine jobs that are being replaced by technology. But there are other middle skilled jobs that are basically being created in healthcare, information technology, and advanced manufacturing. So we'd like to know how many are those, how to conceptualize, how to define them, how many are those, and how fast are they growing? And what are the impact of those jobs in terms of policy and career advice, and in terms of the role of higher education? So that will be the first project I'll be working on. So, thank you.
This issue of middle skills jobs, I don't know if you all have heard of it, but they're occupations that don't require a bachelor's degree, but they require something more than high school diploma. And the focus on these jobs is guiding a lot of conversations about workforce development policy at the state and federal level. And so we just wanted to dig into this a little bit more. The next research strand is about public dialogue.
Tell you a little bit about myself. My background's actually more K-12 related. My PhD is in CNI, and I was a ESL and Spanish teacher for many, many years. And I'm going to talk to you today about a very cool project that we've just started that Matt Wilkren and I are co-directing within the CCWT. And we're titling the project Documenting the Aims on Higher Education in Wisconsin. And what we've done is we're really trying to pull in the student voice, and we've hired 9 student undergraduates from here to serve as part of our research team. And so we had our first workshop 2 weeks ago, 1 week ago, something like that. And basically we spent the 2-day workshop giving them some basic training in qualitative research methods, and we had some background on higher education, how has this happened in the US, what are the debates, what's the issues with this dialogue, and then together we co-constructed 3 primary research questions around the idea of what is kind of the purpose or aims or goals of higher education in the state of Wisconsin, as well as why do people perceive these things? So what kind of patterns do we see? Why do people feel this way? What kind of lived experiences lead into that? And we co-constructed an interview protocol to get at that. So these students are all from the state. They'll be going back into their home communities and talking to 5 members of their community broadly conceived. And I can talk more about that if anyone's interested in. They're going to conduct those interviews over the summer, come back in the fall. We're going to analyze a bunch of awesome data and put together a report that we hope to share with folks here, folks up at the Capitol, as well as to have an event to present the findings.
This is a really exciting project. We intended it to be somewhat similar to what Kathy Kramer did when she went out and talked to people across the state about their views of urban-rural tensions, governance in Wisconsin. Here we just want to get Wisconsinites' voice about what is the purpose or the aim of higher education to you. And we're really curious to hear what we find out. And the last one I wanted to point out is a small grants program. We're currently in the final stages of designing this, but the goal here is to take practitioners involved in career advising or teaching and learning or hiring related issues and pair them with scholars. And so we're collecting a list of problems of practice from the practitioner side, and that's going to be used to design a RFP. And these small grants will then be provided to teams of practitioners and scholars. I think we're going to start off within the region, and then hopefully these teams of scholars will produce findings that will be directly applicable to those practitioners that they're partnering with. And so we're hoping to launch this within a month or so stay tuned for that. I just wanted to run through some of the other center activities before I hand it over to Jim and Linda. The first, again, this is our first research seminar. For the fall, we're talking to a few scholars around the country. Dr. Tressie Cottom from Virginia Commonwealth will be coming here in September. She's focusing on for-profit higher education and some of the issues related to for-profits. We also have Dr. Andy Chan, Lauren Rivera, and Sean Gallagher. We're also going to be developing some practitioner seminars. These will be more brown bag type of conversations about people doing the nuts and bolts of career advising or, faculty development, things like that. And that will be partnering with the Center on Education and Work to design and hold those. We're hoping to have a very robust and active dissemination aspect to the center. So just keep your eye on our website, which should be live soon. Where we'll have these policy and research briefs, podcasts. I just recorded the first one with Linda this morning. Hopefully that'll be awesome. And then blog posts from not just center staff, but also people in the community who are interested in some of these issues. And then finally, we're designing a small internship program for graduate students and undergraduates who are interested in participating primarily in research activities to gain research experience. But we're also open to other opportunities for becoming involved. So today's topic is on one of the essential non-cognitive skills that's being talked about by a whole lot of people out there: work ethic and self-regulated learning. Now, this isn't going to be an academic lecture about these constructs. It easily could be, because these are ideas that people from social psychology to labor economics, they're dealing with these. And you can see in this influential report on the left, it's from the National Research Council, they really highlight work ethic as one of the essential skills that students need in the 21st century to succeed not only in the labor market, but also in school and in life. The way they define it, you can see it's there. There's a lot of messiness when it comes to work ethic and self-regulation. And again, we're not going to get into that, but the other reason we're talking about it isn't just because academics are saying this is important. When you talk to employers, this is one of the things that they often will talk about. And this is a survey from the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And work ethic isn't the top one on the list, leadership is, but it's always near the top. And so we're going to have Jim Morgan and Linda Nielsen talk a little bit about these two constructs and what they mean for college students today.
I've learned two things since I got my bachelor's and master's in education. This building has changed dramatically. It's very nice. And someone changed the grade of Bascom Hill because I could only make it halfway up. I was huffing and puffing. So thank you for not being at North Hall or up in Bascom. I wanted to share with you from a work ethic and employer's point of view what we have learned and what I've learned after 30 years of working with employer associations and state chambers of commerce. And I'm going to spend about the first 6 minutes giving you the demographic background, which is really about an hour worth of information, but we'll zip through it. But I want you to see the context in which this work ethic question is really coming out right now. So this one you've probably seen. 10,000 of us, the baby boomers, are turning 65 every day in the United States. That means a whole lot of people with gray hair are leaving the workforce. This is what it looks like. There are a lot of us. And the people behind us is a much smaller group. And so we got to wait for the other big one to come along. And so this is driving my generation, the baby boomers. We basically influence hospitals, pre-K, kindergarten, all of the schools, bicycle purchases, car purchases, colleges, and we're working our way towards funerals right now. But that big lump came through, huge impact on everything that has happened. The person on the left is me, at least in my father's mind. I was one of the ponytailed, dope-smoking, Capitol protesting people who was never going to amount to anything. And now I'm looking at my children and saying the same thing. So every generation has that look. But right now, the millennial generation and Gen Z behind them is causing people all kinds of consternation because they can't quite figure them out, because they do things differently. And that is adding to this work ethic question because people are starting to question it. And this one I just want to share with you, between my great-grandfather and my son, this is basically what's happened. This is the time frame of what I would say is becoming an adult. And my great-grandfather became adult at the age of about 22 or 23. My kids won't become what I would call an adult till they're probably in their 30s, meaning they've got kids, they've got a mortgage, they've got responsibilities. I'm not saying one is good or bad. I'm just saying the world has changed dramatically in just 4 generations. And then this is what I think is driving it more than anything else. Look at Wisconsin. We are about an 86% Caucasian state. It looks an awful lot like this room. So do most of the employers, so do most of anywhere where you go. So that's an issue for us because we're not a very diverse state, and it makes it a little bit more difficult for us to attract talent. We are not a very fertile state. I have no idea what's happening up the middle of the United States of America. I don't want to know what's happening in the middle of the United States. But this is what's going on in different places. And if you want to look it up sometime, look up Do It for Denmark. Because they literally are running a campaign right now called Do It for Denmark. Because they don't have enough people. I have launched Do It for Bucky, but it hasn't caught on yet. And then in terms of population change, we are not an attractor right now for a whole bunch of different reasons, which we can talk about at a different date. But we're not a state that's bringing in a lot of people, and we're a state that's aging very quickly. So specific to the state of Wisconsin, and again, this is driving towards the work ethic, trust me. It was 1997 when our kindergartners stopped replacing our 12th graders. So we have known for quite some time that all of this is coming. This is also a state, for the engineers in the room, this is not a sine wave, but this is Wisconsin. We gain people from 0 to 17. We lose them from 18 to 35. We get them back from 35 to 55. We lose them from 55 to about 80, and we get them back at 80. Why is that? Well, the 0 to 17s travel with the 35 to 55s. People go away, they have kids, they want to come back to a place with good education, safe schools, safe parks, high quality of life, low cost of living. So those two groups kind of travel together. We lose that 18 to 35. We don't really lose that many, we just don't gain anybody. We're a relatively sticky state, people will stay here, but if we lose them, the chances of us getting them back aren't very good. And the funny thing is we have an opportunity to gain there because a lot of people come to this institution and others from other states that if we can grab them while we're here, we can actually solve this. But right now, we're not. We lose the 55 to 80s. And it's a big deal for Wisconsin because, one, we lose these people that have an awful lot of money that would be investing in people that are entrepreneurs and we're looking for venture capital. So that's a big deal for the state of Wisconsin. And then lastly, we get them back at the age of 80. And if you say, why in the world would we get people back at the age of 80? If you give this presentation to a bunch of high school kids, there's usually a 16-year-old boy that will say, well, they come back to die. Which is actually the right answer, but it's just a little bit blunt. Their families are here, we have really good health care, and the cost of living is low. And so they come back. But you got to think about this, and I'll show you why in just a minute. This is it. This is what's happening in the state of Wisconsin right now. So if I said to you we will have 14% growth in these 3 decades, you'd probably say 14% growth, that's outstanding. We'll be in good shape. But not when 95% of those people are over the age of 65. We're going to go from 750,000 people over the age of 65 to 1.5 million in 3 decades. You got to think about what that means, because those are people that demand services. And so if we don't have people coming in here to employ and to be able to pay for a lot of that, this state's in a lot of trouble because it's getting really old really fast and we're not paying very much attention to it. Now we'll get to the work ethic. So right now, we're expected to add 300,000 jobs just in a 10-year period, and we're going to have 15,000 people to fill them. So now you've got employers, when they're looking for people, this isn't a matter of, well, 100 people will come apply, and I'll just pick the 5 best ones. This is like, I've got 100 jobs, and nobody's coming to get it. So basically, in the war for talent, the employees have won. And if you're not an employer right now, getting down into the middle schools, the high schools, you're trying to recruit people for internships, you better have a long-term talent supply chain strategy, or you're in an awful lot of trouble, because the employees have won. So part of this is a work ethic thing, which I'll talk about, but it's also a numbers game. When you've got 7 or 8% unemployment, that's not a big deal then for an employer, because they're getting people, they'll pick them. When you're talking about under 3% here in Madison, 3.2% for the state, all of these issues now sort of come out. So here's the work ethic part. This is what we heard from employers when we went out and talked to them. When we're hiring new employees, we measure YOTF. I have 7 years of education training and then some teaching. My wife is a middle school teacher. I thought I knew every acronym that had ever been invented. I had never heard this one. The guy says, well, it's years off the farm. It's that simple. If we have a kid who comes to us who is currently on a farm, we will hire them immediately. It's the only thing we look at. And that's getting harder, and that's a disappearing group of people. So I want you to think about that for a minute, because what is someone who works on a farm? They know what it means to get up early. They know what it means to work late. You don't get to quit when you feel like quitting. You got to finish the job, or we're going to be in an awful lot of trouble in this place. You got to be resourceful. When the tractor breaks down, in the back 200 acres, I had to figure out how to fix it. And I better know all of the resources that are available to me, and I better be able to figure that out. So keep that farm kid in mind for a minute as we talk about some of these work ethic things. So here's where this all came from. So I don't want you to think this is just some gray-haired guy up here making this stuff up. This is about 29 years worth of talking to employers, finding out what they're looking for, and really going out and I sent a note to Kathy Kramer. I said, geez, I think I went out and did what you did. I just wasn't smart enough to write it all down and write a book. Matt took all of my information, though, and he wrote a book. So I consider that my book. But he took what we did and actually made some sense out of it. But this was talking to employers saying, what's going on? What are you looking for? What matters to you? And when Matt went through all of the data that we had collected and all the sheets of paper that I had, there's work ethic over on the right side, and it's like 90%. That's in essence what people were looking for. I thought, well, okay, well, this will be easy. Well, what is work ethic? These are the words that came to mind of CEOs when I said, if we're talking work ethic, what does that mean to you? And I'm guessing there's nothing up there that will surprise you. It's just one of those things that it's hard to understand. And not to be rude, crude, and socially unacceptable, but it's like pornography. I'll know it when I see it. Work ethic is I will know it when I see it. And it's a very hard thing for people to describe, and it's a much harder thing when I say to CEOs, if that's what it is, what in the world do you do to try to train for that? How do you teach for that? Is that an intrinsic thing that nobody can do anything about? But this is what they're looking for. And I can guarantee to you what happens is they will say, when we get people in here, there's 10% of them that I immediately know they have all of those things. And there's 10% of the people that they know aren't even in this ballpark. And then there's the 80% in the middle that they're trying to figure out, do they have this or do they not? Because when they're looking for an employee and they're looking for work ethic, this is what they're looking for out there. Those are the words that describe it. And when we were having this conversation, I actually had one recently, and it was around succession planning and talking to employers and saying, okay, when you're looking for that next person, and they continuously said, the person who needs to replace me is going to have a good work ethic. I said, well, what is that? Well, you know, it's it. I said, I don't know what it is, so you have to help me with it. And they were going to the point of saying, you know, my son doesn't have it. So my son will not be replacing me. And so they knew what it was, they raised the kids, they knew what they were trying to produce, and they still hadn't done it even in their own children. And so we started talking about, well, what is it and why does it matter and what are you looking for? So this is what they really said. This is why work ethic matters. This is why if Matt in his shop can figure out how to teach these things and how to make these things intrinsic and how to figure this out, this place will be an absolute gold mine. It fosters satisfaction, and that's personal satisfaction. Because these people that have that work ethic, that are driven, they're usually pretty happy people. Because they're looking for stuff, they're driving themselves, they're trying to figure out what it is that they want to do tomorrow that makes them a better person than what they were today. And I don't know what causes that, but you know those people, they're looking for something to say, tomorrow's going to be a great day because I'm going to expand on what happened today. They're wonderful people to have at your place. They don't require a lot of supervision. And this is just strictly from an employer's point of view, but that is a wonderful thing. I don't have to sit down every 3 days and explain this is what's going on. I don't have to suggest that it's nice that you went this far, but I was kind of expecting you to go this far. They just know it. They're trying to over-deliver. They're trying to give you more than what you asked for. And as someone who has to supervise people, that also is golden because it just makes your life so much easier. These people will drive productivity, not just for themselves, but for everybody around them. And this is a little bit of a competition thing. It's a little bit of a free market thing. But you've got 5 people working and one of them is just outstanding and moving down. Trust me, the other 4 are looking at that and understanding that, wow, that's what it means to do that little something extra. That's what it means to, when I say, you know, the meeting is at 8. This is another generational difference. If I say the meeting is at 8, people that were in that greatest generation, the veterans, they're there at 22. If I say that to a baby boomer, they're coming in about 3 minutes too. If I say it to a Gen Xer, it's probably about 5 to 10 minutes after. And if I say it to a millennial, it's sometime Tuesday. But it's the way that they work. But they'll understand when we've got to get something done, we got to be there. And we got to be there on time. We got to understand what that is. Somebody with a work ethic reduces costs. They're always looking for things. How do we do this better? How do we make this more efficient? What's my role in making sure there's continuous improvement in all of this? It falls into the work ethic again. They eliminate headaches. You know, and for those of you that, you know, have a group of people that you're working with, you know what that means. These are people that don't whine about something, they don't have a fit about something, they don't wonder if, they just go and fix it. And whatever it is, they'll figure it out. And if that means involving other people, they'll go grab the other people, they'll bring them in, and they will fix it. But they'll figure out what it takes to make things easier. These will be the people that will advance. They have the it, and I don't know what else to say to you other than they've got the it, and that means they know what it takes. And they're not stepping on people to get there. It's just the folks that you look around the room, and if you have 5 members of your executive team up here and you say, boy, who are the 3 or 4 hard chargers? Who are the people that have this company's best interest at heart? Who are the ones that will make things happen? They're the 3 or 4 that everybody says, yep, it's Bob and it's Sue and that's the group and that's where we need to go. And so they make life easier there. And then lastly, they're going to be your leadership. They're going to be the group that gets you to wherever it is that you need to get there. And they're doing it, again, going back to the work ethic thing. So all of those numbers that I threw at you are employers basically looking for what they've always looked for, but now they're screaming about it because they're dipping into an employment pool where 97% of the people are there already. So we're down to the last 3%, and that's a tough group. So the work ethic thing has always been there. It's just now extremely exaggerated because of the circumstances under which people are working. So I'm a big John Wooden fan. John Wooden is the person who coached UCLA during its dynasty. He wrote The Pyramid of Success. He's got some incredible quotes. But when I've talked about work ethic with people, this is the one that I keep bringing up. And that success is the peace of mind in knowing you become the best at which you're capable of becoming. Those are the people. They're the ones that are self-interested. They're looking inside and they're saying, did I do everything I could today to make sure that I'm better tomorrow? And again, I don't know how you teach it. You people are smarter than I am. I don't know how you get that built in, that people are reflecting every day and saying, did I do what I needed to do? Did I learn what I needed to learn? Did I take the step so when I come in on Tuesday, I'm better than Monday? Those are the types of people that I think are the ones that when we talk about work ethic, when we say what's going on out there, those are the things that we're talking about.
This university is my graduate school alma mater. I got my PhD here over 40 years ago, right out of kindergarten. Yes, you can buy that. And it was in sociology just up the hill. And by the way, one of my specialty areas was occupations in the labor force. So, you know, I feel I'm in the right place. So that second line there, teaching students self-regulated learning. Let's talk about what self-regulated learning is before we go any further. What it is, it's learning how to learn. It's knowing how to learn. It is the conscious planning, monitoring, and evaluation of one's learning in order to maximize it. So, planning a learning task, thinking, okay, what kind of a task is this? What would be my best strategies? And then starting on that task with a goal, by the way, because otherwise you don't know when you get there. And then monitoring, observing oneself, observing one's learning, asking oneself questions like, did I get that? Or was I zoned out for the last couple of paragraphs? You know, this is not an eye exercise when I'm just talking about reading for an example, but this could also be writing a paper, all kinds of different things that are working a problem. And so monitoring that learning and then evaluating one's learning afterwards, which means true confessions, right? Can I meet my goal? Can I recite 5 important things from that chapter? Did I complete a paper that satisfies all the requirements, satisfies all the specifications? So anyway, have I met my goal? And if I didn't, it's not just saying, well, I failed, that's the end of that. No. Or just saying, well, this was a stupid task anyway, right? No, it is thinking, okay, I need another strategy. I need to try something else that's going to work better. There's not enough of this kind of thinking around. Another way of looking at self-regulated learning is active learning on the inside. We talk a lot about the benefits of active learning, and when we think of active learning, we think of students interacting with each other, doing something, doing an inquiry-based laboratory or something like this, where they're out there touching things, doing things, and talking about those things. This is on the inside. And if you think about it, learning is an inside job. It's something we do to ourselves, which is something that students don't realize at this point. So let's look at self-regulated learning and the work ethic. And there's plenty of tie here. Self-regulated learning teaches that actions have consequences. Now, but Younger people, when I say younger people, I'm talking about Gen Z and millennials, led relatively protected lives. They had parents who would, in many instances, fight their battles for them. And so they would just say, oh, hey, I got a C. I'll tell my parents. They'll call the provost and fix it for me, right? So, no, there's a lot of that going around. But no, it teaches your actions have consequences, including your internal actions. Because what you find out is that what actions you are taking to learn has major consequences on your success in learning, your success in college. Self-regulated learning builds follow-through on responsibilities. Yes, learning responsibilities, but it spills over into other aspects of life as well. Younger people, these past couple of generations, went through K through 12, had it pretty easy. So they tend to believe that learning in college should be easy too. They don't have to work that hard, they don't have to put that much time into homework, and they did beautifully in high school. I think got A's and B's and wind up at a place like this. Wow. They must be doing something very right. They must be very smart, like their parents told them they were, and teachers and all this. So, anyway, so learning should be easy. And the other thing is, learning is something that happens to you. Like the weather happens to you. So you're supposed to sit there in the classroom, and the faculty member makes it happen to you. The faculty member is, first of all, supposed to make it easy and hopefully fun, but definitely the faculty member is the responsible party in the room. Therefore, these people reason, and again, they're not crazy, they got this out of K through 12, and probably from their parents, maybe to a certain extent. So they reason that, okay, if I'm not learning, if this learning isn't happening, it's the instructor's fault. The instructor's not making learning easy, is not explaining things clearly, or is shooting material at us that is over our heads and that they shouldn't be shooting at us. There's one other way that you might not be learning, very popular in this generation, and both millennials and Generation Z. I wasn't born to it. I wasn't born to do math, right? I wasn't born to do music or to do art or to do chemistry. It's too hard, right? It's not supposed to be hard. So the problem is, whether you look at it as that's somebody else's fault, you gave me a C, okay? Or you look at it from the point of view that, well, I wasn't meant to do it. I can't do it. No perseverance, right? You try out something, and if it isn't easy, if it doesn't come quickly, then you drop it, right? No perseverance. And perseverance and the work ethic are so close together, so close together. So, anyway, but self-regulated learning helps cut through that kind of passive thinking, life happening to them, and makes them realize that no, they're more responsible for their lives than they have thought. Self-regulated learning requires self-evaluation. That is part of the process of doing it, that end process of doing it. And so, again, the process of, okay, did I do it or not? Did I do it or not? Self-regulated learning came out of self-efficacy theory. It's related to that. And what was interesting, that Albert Bandura, you might have heard of him, but he's in his 90s. He's still alive. Good for him. I don't know that he's writing books anymore. He's not. But in any case, he noticed in his research that little children who felt more self-efficacious were regulating their learning more and learning more. and then feeling more self-efficacious. So this was a very positive cycle among these children. And so he noticed that. He fought to get self-regulated learning instituted in the K through 12 system. And I needn't tell you that he failed. Very, very sad, because it would have had that self-evaluation component. It would have had really the whole process involved. But if you fail, you pick yourself up again, perseverance, and you try a different strategy. Self-regulated learning fosters commitment to quality. And here's how. One of the ways that faculty can foster self-regulated learning and this commitment to quality is to never let a mistake go by. And that's so often what we do. Let's say we're math homework and get these problems and we just mark them wrong and drop them. Too bad, you didn't do very well. You only got 50%, okay? Go fix yourself or something. Well, the fact of the matter is that students left to their own devices are not going to correct their own mistakes. So what you do is you make a follow-up assignment where students can earn back some of the points that they have lost by doing the problem correctly, by writing an analysis either of their error, why they went wrong, and this is more than math problems, and the correct strategy. And then they solve either that problem or a similar problem. They are going to learn how to solve that problem if it's the last thing they do. This builds a work ethic. This builds commitment to quality, where you're going to use mistakes as a learning opportunity, and they are great learning opportunities. I'm going to share this with you. There's very recent research, brain research using mice on mice who are trained, of course, they're trained in a maze, right? And when they make a mistake, they were supposed to go left, they go right, they realize that, why did I do that? And then they correct their mistake. When they realize their mistake, calcium is released into their brain. Now you think the calcium is just for bones. No. Brain uses it to correct mistakes. So what happens is what the calcium does is it makes the brain more plastic. It makes it more amenable to learning. It makes it more flexible. So this we need to take advantage of errors, of mistakes as learning opportunities, because it does seem to ready the brain to learn. Self-regulated learning enables independent learning. In fact, you can't learn independently without being a self-regulated learner. It is so essential in today's world to keep up with whatever career you get into, certainly the careers that demand college educations and even some of those that don't, to keep up with the field. The explosive growth of skills and knowledge means that you're constantly learning, you're constantly keeping up. It's not just for professionals anymore. It's for everybody to have to keep up. And then there's the reality that for young people today, they say young people today are likely to have as many as 7 careers. Well, even if it's just 3, this means that whatever career they choose, it's going to wind down, and they're going to have to retool into a new one. Yes, they might have to go back to school to do this. But guess what kind of schooling they're going to go back to? Online learning. And if you are not an independent learner, motivated, self-motivated, and self-regulating as a learner, you're not going to cut it. You're not going to get through. And maybe, more than that, you're going to have to learn certain things on your own, as in get the internet and try to research a subject deeply so that you will know how to do it. So anyway, it's extremely, extremely important, especially these days, for students to be self-regulated learners, because otherwise they will never be independent. They will never be lifelong learners, ever. So I just want to acquaint you with a few techniques and how this works. Because you think, well, this sounds like a big project. I can't imagine faculty having the time or the inclination to want to do this. Because there's a part of it that's character building. But character building happens as a result. But really, you can build self-regulated learners with just little tasks here and there through a course. At strategic points, and sometimes as a regular matter of course, but most of these techniques complement the content. They don't work against the content. And they also ensure compliance with assignments. And so I'll give you some examples. I highly recommend that if you're going to do any kind of self-regulated learning at all in your class, you start with a self-regulated learning assignment or activity in your class. So here's a real favorite, this first one. And oh, by the way, these are bookends. So you do it again at the end. So here's a bookend. This is a goal-setting task, some self-monitoring, and definitely self-evaluation. You assign students a little essay at the beginning, and this could be done as homework. How I earned an A in this course. And what you find is that students kind of know what it takes to get an A, whether they are getting that A or not. For A students, they just talk about what they've been doing, right? So they don't have a lot of work to do, but we're not worried about them. We're worried about everybody else. So you find out that these students know what they have to do. They have to come to class every day. They have to start major assignments early. They have to learn how to use the library or more sophisticated search engines than Google. They learn that they have to keep up with the readings or the videos, whatever are assigned. And so they write these things down. Now there's something that happens to many students, not all of them, many students, when they write these things down, and they think, you know, I know how to get an A. I can do this. And the good idea is to have students bring in their little essays to class and put your students in small groups and have them talk about what they came up with for getting an A. They all want to get A's, right? And so they will find that they're coming up with the same things. They will find that A students have been doing these things. Because students look to their peers for guidance more than they look to us. So, you know, hey, if Joe can do it, I can do it, right? Joe seems like a normal person. So anyway, so it is inspiring for students. And then at the end of the course, they have to write how I got an A in this course, or not. Which gets to, again, true confessions. This is a self-evaluation. Did you do what you knew you were supposed to do? And if not, why not? So you kind of have to face yourself. But a lot more higher percentage of students do get A's when you have them do this at the beginning and at the end. You can have students do some reflective writing on the subject matter of the course. You know, what is science, or what is a science? Why is chemistry a science? Or something, you know, what are the humanities? How does history fit into the humanities? How does it fit in as a social science? And these are just, your students are not likely to hit the nail on the head. You don't care. What you want them to see is that they will change, that they will get savvy to what this discipline is all about. So you want students to compare before and after. So you will never ever again get your complaints on your student evaluation course. I didn't learn anything in this course. Because some students will write that. They are not aware that they learned anything in this course. They do not evaluate their learning. They don't monitor their learning. Another thing you can do is you can give students a self-assessment instrument on their metacognitive skills. Metacognition is part of self-regulated learning. It's not the whole thing. Metacognition is thinking about your thinking. And so there are a couple of free instruments out there on the web with lists of metacognitive skills. One of them has 27 skills, another one has 52 skills. You can pick out the ones that you're going to focus on in your course. Students learn that, oh, this is a metacognitive skill. Do you mean I'm supposed to check my answers after I come up with an answer? Do you mean I'm not supposed to jump into a problem, that I'm supposed to think about what kind of problem it is? They don't even know this. They come to us as feral children. They really do. So many things that they don't know about how the mind works, how learning works. And then you do it at the end. You repeat this at the end. But this teaches students quite a few metacognitive skills. Just to give you a sampling of some live lecture wrappers. They're called wrappers because they are activities and assignments that wrap around a component of the course. You know, reading wrappers and silent wrappers and things like that. So, periodic free recall during a lecture. You've been lecturing, and you tell students you're going to do this, otherwise it's not fair. So students will be listening carefully, and you pause and say, okay, now, I want you to write down everything you can remember about what I was saying in the last 20 minutes. And so they do that. It's not to turn in, that's not the point. So there's nothing better than recalling material than to make it easier the next time you recall it. So, you know, the more you remember something, the easier it is to remember next time. That's part of how our mind works. So anyway, so students find out how well they've been listening. They work with their partner to fill in the blanks, and then questions will come up. And this is a point where students will actually think that they have questions because there's something they didn't understand. But if they didn't reflect, if they didn't look back on what they did get and what they didn't get out of the experience, they'll never know and they'll never ask those questions. And so anyway, so that's what concept tests. You put a multiple choice question up on the screen and you have students answer it. Now this should be an application question or conceptual question that will give students feedback as to whether they understood what you were just talking about. So you'd lecture for a while, you stop, you throw up this question. Students choose an answer and they indicate it to you either through some form of some clicker software or through holding up a colored piece of paper. And you know, like red means A and blue means B. So anyway, they choose an answer. They talk to their neighbor about it for a minute, and then they choose an answer again. It might be the same answer, but very often, more often than not, the correct answer will win. And students have taught each other using different terms than what we use, but it works. So students get quick feedback as to whether they understood what you were talking about. Active listening checks. And you tell students in advance you're going to do this too. You talk for 10, 15, 20 minutes, stop, and ask students to write down the 3 big ideas, the 3 main points that you made. It can be really any number. So students do this, and then they turn it into you. Now, you could care less what it says. You want your students to find out about their listening skills. So then you tell the students what those 3 main points were, and then students assess their listening skills. This has been done in an experimental fashion to see how this exercise increased active listening. And so the first time you do it, it's been done anyway, that 45% of the students got all 3 points correct. That was the first time. By the third time, 75% of the students got those major points correct. That is quick work. That makes a big difference. So students learn how to listen. If they don't learn how to listen, what are they going to be like in the workplace, right? Minute papers where you have students doing some sort of reflection, perhaps at the end of a class period. What was the main thing you learned? What were the most important points, the most valuable points, the most surprising points? So you ask them questions like that. What do you feel that you understand the least? This is called the muddiest point. And so students write about that. And then what students are doing, they're not only reviewing the material, they're becoming aware of their learning of it, because they're having to make some decisions about what they found to be most important or most valuable. And then there are visual depictions where you have students literally draw a visual of your lecture. And this also works very well with reading. So let's say if you were talking about a process, students should do a flow chart, right? Of what happened in the process or the sequence of events. Perhaps you were talking about a conceptual hierarchy, whatever. Well, then students should do a concept map. But this really gets students deeply involved in their learning. They really have to know what the key concepts are before they can do a concept map, or the key parts of a process, or the key contrasts if you have them do a matrix. What's amazing about visual depictions is the mind remembers them. The mind remembers their shape. And then the mind can fill in the blanks. In other words, there are words on there, right? But just remembering the shape of the visual helps the mind remember what was in, like, the enclosures or what was the different parts of the process. It's amazing. We need to exploit this more, because the only way we ever remember anything truly substantive long-term is when it's structured, when it's organized. We remember structures and organizations, and then fill in the blanks. Here are some assignment wrappers, just a couple. Math-based problems, one of them is correcting those errors that I talked about. Another one is called Think Aloud, where at the end of a class, students start working on the homework problems in pairs. And they say, well, I say, let's take this approach. Let's try to work it out this way. And then the other member of the pair says, oh, well, that sounds right, or it doesn't sound right. Because too often, students are sitting in class and everything makes sense at the time, the textbooks make sense, but then they can't do the problems. So this way they find out very quickly. And then you're there, you can remedy it. Papers and projects, you have students observe themselves doing the paper project, describing the process, describing their reasoning, describing afterwards the skills they gained doing this process. Here's another one that students really do a bang-up job on. Writing a letter to the next cohort of students in the course about the assignment, particularly if this is a major assignment, how to approach it, what pitfalls that they might encounter and how to avoid them. In other words, how to do well on this assignment, what they're likely to gain from this assignment. And students will do anything for one another. They really will. So they will do an excellent job of reflection on how they did the assignment. Because if you know how you did the assignment, then you are abstracting expert skills. Very important. Fuzzy problems. Very much a matter of describing the reasoning process. Well, how did you decide on your definition of the problem? How did you, what concepts and principles from the course did you find useful? How did you come up with a number of different solutions? This tells students they're supposed to come up with a number of different solutions. So how did you arrive at them? And then finally, how did you pick the best one? On what criteria? So that, students, again, they find out the expert problem-solving process. And experiential learning, here we're talking about service learning, simulations, role plays, internships if it's incorporated into a course in any way. And here the reflections have to be about, okay, what was the connection between the experience and the course? Students often lose that connection. How did you decide to make decisions through this process? What were your initial goals and strategies? How did they change in reaction to how the other players moved through through the simulation or role play. These are exam wrappers. And the first one has to do with reflecting on the graded exam that you got back. So, usually the first question in the reflection is, what was the difference between the grade that you expected and the grade that you got? And how do you feel about that? So, sort of a pleasant thought in many students' cases, because they tend to overestimate their performance. Most students do that. Your A students tend not to, by the way. They will tend to underestimate their performance because all they can think about are the questions that they were a little bit fuzzy on, right? But most students tend to think, oh yeah, I aced that test, and then they don't. Anyway, so what did you, how did you study? What did you do to prepare for this test? Did you put in enough time? How many hours? What are you going to do differently next time to get a better grade in this kind of an exam? So this I've heard that this can be really life-changing for students. It's just a little thing. It can be done as long as you've got the exam in front of you. You can do it. You might want to have the students do it in class. You might want to make it homework if you don't mind losing those exams to black holes out there. But they have to do this. This is not something you grade. You're not, that's not really the point here. And students realize this. This is something for me, and they know that. Resolving incorrect or incomplete problems. And then there's the test autopsy. I love that name. Or sometimes called post-mortem. Looks like this. So students will fill this out on an exam, and you can combine it with the reflective questions I was just talking about. But students have to look at, okay, the points they lost. In other words, what did it cost them to make these errors? What type of question was it? Maybe you were missing all multiple choice questions. Maybe you were missing true-false questions, or tended to. And then, why did you miss it? Why was the answer incorrect? Were you careless? Did you misread the question? Did you not budget your time correctly? What is the reason? And so students can't help but see patterns here. Right? It really makes it clear to students where their weaknesses are. And notice all of these reasons why the answers are incorrect is attributed to their actions, attributed to their thinking, their preparation, their reading of the exam, every single one of them. And this builds a sense of responsibility. Nowhere there does it say, the instructor was mean. It just isn't on there. Just not, and they never add columns. They do go along with this. And this test autopsy and the reflective questions have been used by learning assistance centers, academic success centers. They use these things in helping students realize where they're going wrong, but faculty can use them as well. And so some faculty still say, you know, why in the world do I have to teach my students how to learn this material? Because they don't know. Faculty, well, they're supposed to know, right? They don't, okay? You know, you've got to work with what you have and where you have to start with these students. And if you don't teach students how to learn physics, how to read physics, how to work the problems, and how to take responsibility for getting those problems right, then you're not going to teach physics. So too often faculty are married to their field, and they think, well, if I talk about physics for 3 hours a week, I am being faithful to my field. And not worrying about the impact that, let's say, like just lecturing is having on the students and having on student learning. And they need to be concerned about that. They need to face it. I'm sorry, teaching students how to learn your discipline is part of your responsibility. This is what's, and the best way to do it is through self-regulated learning. Faculty members just hate to teach study skills and test-taking skills, and I don't blame them. Self-regulated skills or self-regulated learning skills are something that those professors were doing in school themselves. They picked it up. But the problem is they were very good students, and the best students can grow up to become the worst teachers because they don't know where the bottlenecks are. They don't know where the study problems are. They knew how to study, right? And so why don't you? Why don't all of you? I don't understand. Well, you know, sorry, you professor, you doctor, whoever, you're the weird one, okay? You're the strange one. You're the outlier. So you've got to deal with the rest of the world. And this is why faculty development is so important. It's to, faculty development teaches faculty how to teach and to do other things as well, but definitely how to teach. And faculty need that more than anyone because they learn so easily and very few other people do.
I'm curious, Linda, about if anybody's done longitudinal studies of children depending what their preschool environment was. And of course, as a parent, I'm reflecting on my own children who went to Montessori, which is all focused on independent learning. And so I'm just curious if there's any research or literature on the before K-12.
Yes, as a matter of fact, there is some, and this is related to it's an aspect of self-regulated learning, but I don't know how many of you have heard of the Marshmallow Experiments. Some of you have. Okay, so these experiments were done with like preschoolers. And they were sitting around a table and they were given one marshmallow. And they were told, okay, if I'm going to go out of the room now, and if you wait until I come back into the room, you'll get a second marshmallow. This is deferring gratification, right? Which is an aspect of it all, and it's definitely a part of the work ethic, right? You can't go out and be impulsive. Well, hey, it's 2 o'clock. Let's go drinking. It's happy hour somewhere in the world. So anyway, the little children who ate up that one marshmallow didn't do so well in life later on, and I mean when they grew up, because this was a longitudinal, I think it was at least a 30-year study that was done. While those that waited for the experimenter to come back in to get that second marshmallow did splendidly well. They did better in school. They were more likely to stay off of drugs and not get pregnant or get a female pregnant. They were more likely they had a higher educational attainment, and they tended to be higher mental health. They tended to be more resilient, more flexible, and work with people better. And they made more money. They had a higher income than those who gobbled down that marshmallow. So you can see character building right there in those ages. Now, that's the place where we should start building self-regulated learning skills. I mean, I would love to see it come to K through 12, kindergarten, whatever, preschool. But we still can build it. We still can build self-regulated learning skills in college. And we can teach college students the rewards of deferring gratification. Not all of them will take it, but enough of them will. You can change people's lives. And that's the beautiful thing about being a faculty member.
For those children who did get more of that kind of education as a preschooler, not necessarily naturally able to self-regulate, if that made a difference. And I think what you're saying is we should start as young as possible, but I think you're saying there's hope for those students who didn't start then, can start when they're 18, 19, 20.
Absolutely. Absolutely they can. Now, there's some people out there who are self-destructive, right? We all know some people who are self-destructive. Students are people, therefore there's some self-destructive students among them. So they won't. But they don't lead very pretty lives, and they're not going to. And that's just very, very sad. But hey, it can still make a difference in most people's lives, yes.
And I'll jump in if you're interested in longitudinal studies. Jim Heckman down at Chicago, they're doing quite a bit of research on early childhood education. and interventions on things like this and tracking those students over time.
Can you compare Wisconsin to surrounding states? How do we compare? Is this the same thing going on in other Midwestern states? And then is there a state that's getting it right, that is doing a good job of attracting young workers and retaining them, or that doesn't have a problem with them leaving?
Yeah, I mean, in general, what I describe demographically is an upper Midwest and a far Northeast phenomenon, just in terms of the demographics. So they're all kind of in the same boat as we are. The ones that are making the difference are cool. And I don't know how else to put it other than cool. 22-year-olds will go where other 22-year-olds are. It's just that simple. It's probably always been that way. But they have a Denver, or they have an Austin, or they have a Minneapolis, St. Paul, and they've created a way to make that an attractive place to be. I mean, quite frankly, I think Madison is getting there. Milwaukee, there are a lot of really great things going on in Milwaukee, but every time Milwaukee makes the news, it's rarely for one of those really great things. It's usually for some sort of disaster type thing. So those things are playing into it. And I think you're also starting to see states try to brand themselves now. That was the whole, with Michigan, where they were, trying to, I'm trying to remember what was the Michigan slogan on all of their commercials? No. It had something to do with water, which it all went down the tubes with Flint. Pure Michigan. It was Pure Michigan, and they were trying to sell this Michigan thing, and the Flint thing kind of threw that for a loop. But you'll see some of the other states actually trying to make themselves look like this is a cool place, this is where things are happening, this is where we have bikes, this is where we have, the epics of the world and things like that. So they're actually trying to get their economic development, their workforce development, their tourism departments really on the same page to say, if we start targeting 20 to 35-year-olds, we can probably turn this around. The last thing that some of those other states are doing a better job of is, we know in this university system, if someone comes from out of state and they have an internship while they're here, their chances of staying here go from like 14% to like 60%. That's huge. And other states and colleges are starting to realize that if we can give these kids an experience in this state, we can get them to stay, because we have good education, we have good jobs, we have a diverse economy, we've got great outdoor activities. We have everything, we just got to convince people that it's there. Because otherwise, those of you who travel a lot, there's a lot of places in the United States who think Wisconsin is somewhere north of Ottawa, and it's hard to find.
I'm wondering if you both can talk about the role that you see identity playing, or identity is playing, in these two concepts of ethic, work ethic, and also on self-learning regulation. So for instance, if I'm thinking about work ethic, I would want to know more about how implicit bias might play into how people, employers specifically, are seeing the different potential employees that are coming to them, and how that then translates into how they determine who has work ethic and who doesn't. It's so ambiguous, but other parts that are consequences of our identity, like stereotype threat or imposter syndrome, how does that all play into these concepts?
Yes, it plays into it because when employers are hiring, they really don't get to know that person, right? And so, yeah, and that leaves people open to stereotyping, right? And hiring on the basis of stereotypes. And it's really sad, because if they are looking for dispositions and character traits, spending an hour at most with this, interviewing this person, is not going to tell you what you need to know. And that's most unfortunate. There are like instruments out there that can measure at least some of these characteristics. That might be worth looking into. I know that some, I've heard of some employers that will give the, Minnesota multiphasic personality inventory test to find out, to see how crazy you might be. So, because they're worried about, they've obviously had some bad experience somewhere along the line, so somebody's instituted those tests. Sometimes giving candidates scenarios, cases, how would you react in these particular situations, can tell them something more. But a lot of the questions that are used to interview candidates are, you know, to be expected, like, what's your greatest weakness? That is the dumbest question, because everybody's ready for that question with something that isn't true. Okay? Not really true, is it? Well, pick out a strength and then make it say, like, I work too hard. Okay, that's garbage. All right, that's complete garbage. So you've got to be very savvy about how you get to know this person. You get to know this person decently. You might even want this person to interact with other people. So it's not just a one-on-one kind of interview. That's not very helpful. But neither is the group interview where everybody goes around and asks the same questions. This is the way they do it in academia, right? You go to this committee and each asks the same questions of every single, and nobody's getting to know anybody. So we've got to be more careful in our hiring process, in our screening process. No. To get around those stereotypes, by the way, that's one thing it'll do, a major thing it'll do.
You know, I would say that that's where employers are moving now. I mean, this whole onboarding process has gone from being, you know, an interview, you're hired or you're not, to here you're going to meet with these 3 people individually, you're going to lunch with this group. Their company will say, pick the 5 people you want to go with, so you don't think you've been set up by whoever we're having you, you know, interview with. And so it's become a much more elaborate process, especially as you move up in how high up is that position, because you're going to need somebody really good. I think you're also seeing a lot more of it being dependent on who did they work for before and what do those people have to say about them, or is there somebody in your current organization that knows that person? Because we've gotten to the point where I will hire someone, if there's somebody that I trust in our organization that says, I know them, I work with them, they're fantastic, that will shoot them to the top between my taking that person or, okay, I've spent an hour with you once, another hour with you a second time, and maybe a third hour with you. I still don't have any idea who that person is, but if I've got these references over here from people that I respect and know, that goes an awful lot of ways with an employer. Once you're in, I would say the chance of the bias thing on work ethic drops tremendously, because that work ethic is so important, whether you're old or young or millennial or African American or white or whatever. It's back to the it. I know it, I see it, I know what it looks like, and I will make sure that we give all the resources we can to that person to hang on to them. So, I mean, the nice thing is once you've got them, it gives you a chance to let all the biases go, because you've seen them. You've seen what they've done. You've seen their work product. You know how they're outperforming everybody else. And regardless, even if you've got some biases, and that's not to say some still won't be that way, but even if you have some biases, it's really hard to say this person is completely outperforming everybody else, and maybe I don't like them. It doesn't make any difference. They're completely outperforming everybody else.
The work ethics that you described, would you say the employers that you interviewed, is it regardless of the degree the employee has, and or is it grown with responsibilities?
I don't think it has anything to do with the degree. I shouldn't say anything, but close to anything, because whether that's the lowest level high school educated person doing X or the PhD doing this research, if I put all those words back up there, it's the same thing. It's that maintenance worker is the one who's probably going to see, wow, we got all this scrap sitting on the floor. I can either pick it up, or I can suggest, hey, maybe there's a different way that we don't have all of this scrap. Or they look at a process that a company's doing and saying, this makes no sense. I'm watching this piece travel all the way around. They're going to see things there that nobody else can possibly see. Same thing with a PhD engineer who might look at a processing thing, and if they're just thinking about what's going on, will say, I know this is how we've made it for 30 years, but boy, did anybody ever think about that? It might be to a different level. It might have a bigger impact on the organization, but I think all 40 of those words that I had up there would apply across the board.
Are there any successful examples that you can point to of industry and business making an investment in training around these types of skills in their workers? So I worry a little bit about always kicking it back to K-12 and higher ed, especially if it's such a competitive market.
As I said, there's that 10% where everybody, yep, they've got it. And there's a 10% where you just think, wow, this is going to be tough. And then you got to read the other 80%. And so you're starting to see companies now that are taking people who they think might be the up-and-comers, they think may have that, it's hard to tell, and they'll begin to move them through the organization in a variety of different places. They'll give them 3 months in 6 different departments, under a different group of managers, under a different set of circumstances, and start to see how they react to that. For 2 reasons. One, to see if they can grow in that position and understand. And secondly, so that all those managers start to get to look at these people. This becomes the bench, if you will, where they're starting to look for folks and say, okay, that's where our people are. I had this person come through. I think that they're outstanding. The amount of money that's put into training, trying to figure this stuff out, and employers aren't trained, you know, that they didn't know that stuff. They're busy hiring all of you away so that you can help them in their own organization. So it's not their thing, but they're having to figure out how to make it their thing, and usually that means a partnership with an institution like this or a technical college to say, this is what our issue is, can you help us come in here and figure it out? So I would say that the employers that have developed those relationships with their schools of higher education are the ones that are starting to incorporate it actually, you know, right into their company.
Well, thank you again, Jim and Linda. Really appreciate it. Thank you all for taking